Don't we all love a good fighting chess? That is exactly what we're going to see in this game that I'm about to show you from the quarterfinals of the currently ongoing Chess World Cup 2025 in Goa, India, between Nodirbek Yakkuboev and Alexander Donchenko, who is coming off from a thriller matchup against Super Grandmaster Li Kuang. Very dramatic. It went all the way to the sudden death, which is basically 9 games back and forth. I think 9 at least. If this is your first time on the channel, I'm International Master Zura and this is my channel where I share love of the game and try to help you get better along the way. So do consider subscribing and let's get into it. Nodirbek, who is known for his uncompromising playing style, starts the game with d4. Donchenko is also a very sharp player. Knight to f6, pawn to c4, and g6. Early on, black is fianchettoing the bishop and point towards the King's Indian defense structures, or Greenfield. I think Donchenko actually is a Greenfield player originally, but Nodirbek suggests f3 line. This is called the anti-Greenfield, or some call it an Alekhine line against the King's Indian. The idea is white does not put the knight on c3. So if black plays d5, let's say if knight c3, d5, then captures on d5, e4, knight can capture on c3 with the tempo, and then black will try to target white's center in this position, and this is the main position of the Greenfield defense. So Nodirbek wanted to avoid that and goes f3. Now the point is, if d5, pawn captures after knight d5, e4, and this knight will have to lose tempo going back because there's no knight on c3. After f3, Donchenko decides to switch up the trails, which is one of the main line here. Pawn to c5, targeting the d4 pawn. d5, white grabs more space, and we are already in a very dynamic position here. White is lacking in development so far, but was able to establish a very firm control of the center here. Black puts his bet on the quick development and the counter-attacking the center in the next few moves. Now, knight to e2. Where is this knight going? This knight is going to c3. You may be wondering, why is this knight not going to c3? Well, after the trades on d5, this knight is going to try to come on c4 via either a3 or d2. That is the idea. And that would be more useful placement of the knights than having this knight go to c3, because then we wouldn't have a good spot, good square for the knight on g1. So knight to c3, e takes d5, c takes d5, a6, and we are in a standard, or more or less standard, Benoni position. Now black is trying to expand on the queen side with b5. Obviously white does not allow that. This is almost a no-brainer of a reply. a4, and knight goes to h5. So far we are still in the territory of the theory here, more or less, but this is where things go completely off the track. Queen to e2 is already a novelty, or at least according to the chess.com database here, from the masters database, that is to say. The most common move apparently here was in other 6 games that was played in this position. White had played bishop to e3. Nodirbek decides to play queen to e2. Now you may be wondering, what is the point? What if black was to go queen to h4 check? Well, there are 2 ways. I'm not sure which one Nodirbek intended to reply with. There is a possibility of trading queens, immediately offering the trade of queens, because if we go to the end game, this has to be in white's favor. White has more space. Knight is going to come to c4, target this d6 pawn. So I think that is going to be in white's favor. And also there was g3 line, and knight takes g3 is not possible due to this pin queen f2. And now knight cannot capture the rook because the queen is going to be hanging. If bishop e5, then f4, and still white wins the piece here. Therefore, after queen e2, black plays bishop to d4 to cover the f2 square. Well, not afraid of the ghosts here. g4, in for a penny, in for a pound. Pawn to g4, taking the most principled approach, and both players, I think, at this point are more or less out of the theory, and this is my guess due to the time situation here. White has spent about 30 minutes at the moment so far, and black has spent a little over 20 minutes. Queen to h4 check. What is the point? King to d1. King is chilling in the center here. Knight was under attack, so has to retreat back. Knight to f6. King goes to c2. Who cares about the safety here? It's about who takes the initiative first. A little bit of the coordination between pieces here. Knight fd7. Bishop goes to f4, attacking the d6 pawn. This position, objectively, computer evaluates as a little better for white, about +1, but then again, most Benoni positions is in white's favor usually, and it is aimed at the dynamic play where computer's evaluation probably from the practical standpoint does not mean too much. There will be a lot of fight and double-edged play. Queen back to f6 to defend. Bishop retreats back to e3. Knight goes to e5, hitting the f3 pawn. Knight d2. Already look at the center. Queen goes to h4. Bishop returns back to f4. Now, why queen h4 here? I'm assuming white wants to play g4 next, and g5 maybe, and then f4, kicking the knight away, gaining even more space. So queen h4, bishop to f4, and h5. Okay, let's open it up. This is an indication that black is not planning on castling either. Bishop g3, queen returns back, g takes h5. There is no way to hold onto this good pawn structure, so it has to go g takes h5. Now rook gets into the game here, and pawn to h4. Here's a very interesting move from black. Now black says, I have brought all my king side pieces in the game. What about my queen side pieces? What do I do with these guys? These guys at the moment are just chilling. Maybe bishop is included in the game, but rook and the knight, not so much. Rook to a7, trying to bring this rook in the game. Pawn to a5, not so easy, my friend, because if you play b6, that's gonna be related to the pawn sack. Well, who cares about pawns? b5, ab, rook takes b7 en passant. No, black did not forget en passant. That was intended to open up the b file, and very likely this pawn is going to be captured back. Or is it? White says, I'm willing to give up my precious dark square bishop for your equally precious knight on e5, but the main point of it is then I can bring my knight to c4 to defend my pawn on b6. Pawns are hard to get, man. Rook takes h4. All right. Black says, I might as well grab the h pawn then if you want to keep on the b6 pawn. Okay. That is going to allow opening up the h file. But more importantly, now I can get your dark square bishop and ruin your pawn structure and get a very valuable piece off the board. The dark square bishop. This dark square bishop is worth, I don't know, probably 5 points of material usually in the Benoni positions. Queen to e3, now immediately targeting this weak pawn on c5. Rook takes b6, and instead of capturing it back immediately, which would not be bad because of queen h2, we have bishop e2 here blocking it, but simply queen d8, this is still a big advantage for white due to this very powerful protected passer in the center d5, which kind of shuts down black's position. So this pawn and this pawn are not the same. We are not the same, bro. If they could talk, that's probably what they are saying each other. But Yakubboev goes for even more. Pawn to b4. I want to take on c5 with the pawn. If you take with the rook, before queen c5, now you're going to lose the game, basically. Very heavy material in the next move here. Knight to d7, pawn takes c5. Now rook goes to b4, and look at white pawns. After taking on c5, here I think this is just a matter of conversion, because look at this beautiful pawns. Those pawns and that pawn chain is music to white's ears, and now it's going to be impossible for black to do anything without giving up the material on the next few moves, and that's kind of what happens. These pawns are going to be pushed forward, and black will have to sacrifice something, namely a piece, a minor piece, which is more than enough here to decide the game. Then white could try to go for the trades here and convert in the end game, but there are two ways you want to convert your material advantages. Number one is trade and simplify into the end game. Number two is go for the attack, and Yasser Seirawan calls this overwhelm your opponent, because you have more firepower. Think of it as having more men into the war. You want to take initiative, overwhelm your opponent before they try to set up the defenses. And that's what happens here. White outpowers black simply by the number, and a little bit of the brilliancy farming here with rook g6. Idea is if you take back queen to d8, and since that rook is loose, it's gonna get lost with the discovered attack trick. Knight to e6 and queen d6 with the check. Qe7 simply moving the rook away. I believe there must have been a better way, but putting the rook on the safe square where it is defended. Now black is basically on minutes here, and they got the time control, which means that after 40 moves, players get additional 30 minutes. So Donchenko realized that with time on the clock, this game is over. So he resigned. What a game. I think definitely we could tell that the previous match, I think, played the role on this for sure, but that does not take away credit from Nodirbek's relentless play in this game, and a very well-deserved victory. Let's see what happens in the second game tomorrow. We are down to last 8 men standing at the World Cup. So let me know what you think. Who are your favorites remaining at the moment? And if you want me to review other matchups. And hope to see you in the next one.